Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another special episode of the Unstoppable Mindset Podcast. This is the Sports Roundtable. And tonight we have a very special guest with us who has been out the past couple of weeks, but she has made her return and has taken over for Morgan, who can't be here tonight. Kim Brady is in the house. Everybody, please give a warm welcome, round of applause, all that other fun stuff. Kim is an amazing individual. She is a former professional soccer player and current business coach, helping people.
Not professional. I was not professional.
Former, almost professional.
Yeah, you can put the almost in there.
Former almost professional soccer player. She's an author of 2 different books, a co-author of a book that she and I are co-authors on, which is called Forever Athlete. And then her book that she has recently also come out with called Get Stuck In. She is the owner of Kim Brady Business Coaching. She's an amazing individual, and obviously the title of it speaks for itself. She's a business coach, helping people be able to transition outside of sports into the business world and get a hot start in the business world, using all these skills to find their superpowers and be able to go out there and absolutely conquer the world. So when we get to the point where we are going to be putting in our niche responses to some of these topics, she is going to be coming at it from how someone can find their superpower to tap into either the results that we're talking about or better results than what we are referencing. So be on the lookout for that. As always, if anybody has a recommendation for the name of what we're doing here right now, it's called the Sports Roundtable. Feel free to leave a comment. Let us know where you heard this podcast on, whether it was on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. Just go ahead and let us know, leave a review, comment, all that other great stuff. We have Bill Dean with us here as always. Morgan is out with watching the Cavs and Brooklyn Nets game, which, sorry to say, they're getting smoked by Kyrie. Simply cannot miss a shot tonight. So, I mean, was it worth it? Probably to miss this. But tonight we have a hot lineup. So, number one, the Masters tournament just finished. And it was probably the first Masters in a while that felt like nobody was touching the leader, Scottie Scheffler. He was just, I mean, day one, played pretty conservatively, and then from there, it seemed like he just took off. But the story of the day that we're going to get into is the man who brought up second place, Rory Mcilroy, who absolutely demolished his final round. And I think there's a massive lesson that we can dive into on there and talk about balance, talk about all these different things and some of the quotes that he had in an interview. And the second part of this conversation is going to come down to team compositions. As we know, the NBA playoffs are right around the corner and team selections have been made and all this other stuff. And one team in particular did not make it, the Los Angeles Lakers, which a lot of people are saying, hey, we didn't make it to the playoffs because not all the super team members were on the court at the same time. There were injuries, all these other things. But every team deals with that stuff throughout the course of a season. And it just comes to show that maybe having a quote unquote super team may or may not actually guarantee that you are successful as an individual within your sport. So, or as a team in your sport. So we're going to dive into that as well. First topic. Now, as we go around, questions will be asked and each person will have 90 seconds on the clock to give their response to the question. And then at the very end, we will do some quick takeaways and other stuff like that and things that people should know, especially from a mindset perspective. We are the biggest thing that we want to make sure that we are covering on here is we're taking a mental approach to this in terms of being proactive, mental skills, tools, techniques, and all these other amazing things that we don't get to see inside of sports that we bring up here that obviously we are professionals with. So topic number one, Rory Mcilroy comes out and shoots a 64 on the last day to bring it. I think he finished at -9 on the day or for the tournament. And one of the big things with Rory is that he's an individual who has made it very clear that he will not sacrifice time with family and being a normal human being in order to go and chase more victories, train extensive, crazy hours like some of these other individuals do. And there was this sense of freedom that he talked about being able to play with on Championship Sunday. And it was quoted in an article on CBS Sports that part of Rory's problem at major championships is that he can sometimes get too deep inside of his own head. And that's the unintended consequence of being relatively normal as a human being rather than an elite individual who obsesses over the game. And it's the unintended consequence. He seems unwilling to trade his humanity for more trophies, even if that's even an option. However, there was a raw freedom that he played with on Sunday that hopefully encourages more of the same in the future. So one of the big things that came out of this article was this balance between being a young gun in sports and playing highly aggressive. And as you get older in sports and realizing the value of conservative play. So my first question that we are going to go around with is, does this apply to every sport when it comes to playing aggressive, playing conservative in age and all these different things? Does the game really change for a lot of people mentally as they play it longer? And what your all's take on this change actually being? So the first person I want to go to here is Kim. I'm going to come over to you and I want to hear your opinion on specifically if you think this concept of the balance between aggression and conservative play, if it changes as you continue to play the game, or if people just lean one way or another. You're on the clock.
I definitely think, when looking at most sports, I think the first part of your question was, is this applicable to all sports? And in some ways I agree that it does. That Spitfire kid that comes out and just goes with reckless abandon. We can see it with, with players in the NBA. We can see it with players in soccer. We can see it in multiple sports, this firebrand type aggression. And then over time, you develop nuance and different tactics and different skills, and you gain a wisdom over your own body and focus on that mental strength and mental capacity to shift into different gears, right? Knowing when to slow it down, knowing when to ramp it up. I think there is some maturity that comes with people, and watching him play and being able to just enjoy the game again like he was a kid, that is a gift. That is a gift. And for someone who gets in his head a lot, I also can relate to that as well. I definitely think that over time, those two factors definitely play across all sports. So yes.
Bill, what are your thoughts?
I would agree. I think the youthful energy, right? As a kid in a sport, whether it's individual sport like golf or a team sport, you're just always playing, like the Tasmanian devil, because you're just having fun and you don't know how to regulate the competitive emotions with the passion for winning and being excited wherever you're at. And so what I thought was cool in that article, there was a quote, right, that said, he used to ask, why isn't Tiger more aggressive? And the response was, 31-year-old Tiger knew when to take risks or chances, something of that nature, versus the 21-year-old Tiger. And that comes from experience, right? Muscle memory. You do something over and over. Tom Brady talks about it in his shows. When you see something, it naturally slows down. So yes, I think the wisdom of repetition, which you can't have, as a kid. So you're just always out there being aggressive. If you remember when Tiger was just, winning every tournament, right? And he was so young, people just assumed that was normal. Then I remember his other breakout moment. I think it was dark in the PGA Championship one year. And he was still playing the same way because in his mind, he could see what was going to happen. And that just came with experience. And it was dark out. So.
Yep. So where I come from on this is I think there's especially, I mean, number one, I do agree that it comes in every single sport. There's this balance between being aggressive and being conservative. And I think the definition of aggressive is really just kind of this all out mentality of you're going to just play without fear of a consequence occurring. And then conservative is obviously trying to be way more strategic about your approach and understanding that you sometimes aren't trying to go for the touchdown. You're just trying to get the first down, right? And getting the first down may be more meaningful than trying to go for it all at one moment. So it moves from kind of this haymaker boxing match to more of a chess match. And you see that happen a lot within, when people talk about high level boxing, the older you get in it, the more it becomes a chess game. And it's really that entire mental thing. So when it comes down to Rory and the situation that we witnessed in the round that he played, it was really one of those things where you got to see him later in his general career actually be pretty aggressive on stuff, and you see it pay off even for someone who in general would probably weigh the pros and cons of being conservative versus being aggressive. And I think we do get those moments every once in a while, and so it's really awesome to see when that happens with a veteran. So the next question that I would like to ask, which I'm pulling up my handy list of questions here, that this balance of aggression, being forward, being assertive, all these other things, and then being conservative and more strategic about your approach because you're thinking about things more holistically. This happens a lot in sports, right? You see this balance, athletes as they get older. We just talked about it. How does this apply to the business world? How does this apply to life outside of sports? Does it even translate the same way? And if it does, what's your all's take on how people navigate this? Kim, I'm going to come back to you to start this question off again.
Yeah, I think it's something I actually created a program with my business, which is the Sprint to Startup program. And it's a 30, 60, 90 day full intensive on how to get your small business idea and concept off the ground. And, taking the pillars of business, operations, sales, and marketing and beta testing, right? Like you have to have the back structure. You have to build your business Bible, as I talk about all the time. And you have to have these foundational pieces, but that foundation grows over time, which is, as athletes, we also grow over time. We shift and change our body. I mean, when you look at how Tiger played, he wasn't even supposed to play a year and a half ago. The man almost died. And even though he didn't really, he was in the final game on Sunday. He made it, at least to the last day, but just walking was an effort for him, right? But to play at the level that he plays, average people couldn't do what he did, right? And so over time, it's applicable in business to start quickly and then take a moment to assess and then go back again and change over time. This is a business, excuse me. This does apply in business as much as it applies in sport. You can apply the same principles. I think that's why we all really like the athlete to business mentality.
Very nice. Bill, thoughts?
I would agree with Kim, and I think I was kind of sitting there as Kim was going through a few points. I'd equate it to when you're young, you're learning things, you want to win, right? You want to make that name for yourself, and you think you have a plan and this is how you're going to do it. And I think in business, when you start off, you might be thinking, if your motives are to be the next, Fortune 500 company or to make your first million, if that's your driving force, then when that adversity or when different things present themselves, then you tend to try to throw the ball in a window that's not there and something gets intercepted, right? Versus sticking to the plan and pushing through and trusting it. And then, yes, as you get established and opportunities present yourself, you're in a better position to take a more calculated risk, right? Like, okay, that window, if I give my best shot here, I know I can get it, to my star receiver. Just like with this opportunity that's presented itself, I know this makes sense, for my business, the, marketing, the branding, the delivery, the product, whatever it might be. So I definitely think it equates, and like most things, right? Very parallel to sports.
And I think we've absolutely, we're setting a bit of a record here where we're all agreeing on almost everything, because, and maybe it's the topic itself, but man, I agree with both of you. I think this absolutely translates over to business. When you are a younger person in business and you're trying to figure things out, I mean, one of the biggest things that I like to throw out there, especially when it comes to, if somebody asks me, hey, I'm younger in my business career, like, what advice would you give? I'd say be assertive, be hyper assertive, be hyper aggressive in your pursuit of getting experiences, right? It's not about getting to the top or making a certain amount of money, but it's about getting experiences and being relentless in finding those experiences and diving into the deep end and figuring out what you like and what you don't like. And as you get older and you start to have more experiences, you can start to then decide how you want to be strategic with those experiences to position yourself for exponential growth. Because those first 10 years of your career, you may or may not be feeling like you're moving the needle very much. But then once you hit a certain threshold, you start to understand and be able to see a little bit more of the chessboard, because you've gone out there and you put in the work and you've understood how to make those chess pieces and put them into play so that you can actually go and make a difference for yourself on an exponential level and be more cautious and be more competent in your pursuit of all these things. So beautiful. The next thing,
like that buzzer, don't you, Kim?
What?
I said, you like that buzzer, don't you? It's catchy.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. It's a great one. It's super.
It hasn't gone off on me yet. I'm sure it will.
We've all been.
I'm sure it will.
Mercy of it. It will at some point. So this next section that I want to ask is, so obviously, when it comes to this subject that we've been talking about, specifically the round that Rory had, right? We can assume that he was playing with all the superpowers at play. He was playing with very little distractions. He was playing with high-powered dynamics behind him or in favor of him. And his team, which is him and in the group that he uses, was obviously on that day, and he was firing on all cylinders. So what I want to ask for this next portion of this is, going off of this example, I want to see if we can dissect some of the things that we notice within a general game of golf and then comparing it to somebody like Rory. So for example, I will start first. So I'll put myself on the clock here. And the question being, how can people start to recreate a performance that they've witnessed Rory have? Right? Whether that be, how do they remove distractions in order to be able to tap into their potential? How can they find their superpowers to be able to do that kind of stuff on a normal basis? How can they make sure their team is in a great position so that performances like that become a natural occurrence? So that's kind of the question that I would like to ask you all. And this is going to be coming from your all's niche. So I'll go first from a distraction perspective. Now, knowing that golf is a highly mental game, right? There's a whole book about it, The Inner Game of Golf, which is a translation of The Inner Game of Tennis by Tim Galway. And golf being a highly mental game, one of the biggest things that I notice that people get in their heads about is self-talk, right? You see it when you're on TV, people hit the ball and they have microphones everywhere. You can always hear people saying stuff. And one of the things that I rarely noticed during Rory's round was that he said certain things out loud, things that were judgmental of his play. And I think that eliminates such a massive factor that can distract most athletes from being able to tap into their fullest potential, is saying that self-talk out loud in a negative manner. That was one of the biggest things that I noticed that he immediately eliminated with some of his, with just the way that he presented himself. He was able to cut off some of the negative talk that I noticed. And therefore, he opened himself up to have access to a higher level of energy and be more excited and be able to get after it more and to be able to have more fun and hit better shots and be more excited with the crowd. And he fed off of their energy. And you just don't get that opportunity when you consciously decide to talk down to yourself. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things people should take away from this last weekend. Bill, what you got?
Yeah, for sure. With, from the perspective of positive, negative self-talk, how you utilize your statements to keep your composure. If you lose your composure, how you get yourself back to center, balance. Those things are great. I wonder a little, and I think it's a great story, and I'm very happy for Rory. I wonder if he'd have been in the final pairing on Sunday, would he have been able to start from the first tee with that same mindset, right? When you're +2 or +1, whatever he was, you do approach it differently. Now, once he got on that run, then he kind of knew, like, hey, I got house money here. Like, let's go. Oh, I'm in the bunker. Great. Probably going to hole this one out. And boom, he holes it out. And so I do think, when house money presents itself and you can take advantage of it, that's great. So I hope he builds on it. I'd love to see. I think golf is better when Rory really builds on, some of the expectations that were there. He's great for the game. But yeah, I think he definitely had in check the outbursts, the throwing the clubs, the slamming of it. But at the end of the day, he knew he wasn't going to win it, most likely, right? Unless Scotty had a meltdown. On the flip side of it, Scotty even said after he's like, yeah, what you saw was a very composed golfer. It was not like that in my head. And he was dealing with the pressure.
Kim, how do people find their superpower so that they can have a round like we all saw?
I think there's two pieces. One, Rory had nothing to lose. And with golf, as in business, you have to bet on yourself. You have to bet on yourself. And I think, obviously the self-talk and the removing distractions, etc. But I also, and I know you guys do this too, these are some of my affirmations that I write down and I have, and I mean, I just have them, things that I want to say to myself, right? It's what do I say to myself on a daily basis to prove that I can bet on myself and that I have nothing to lose. And I think it's about taking advantage of opportunities that are afforded you. And if you look at Cam Smith, right? He was in the final pairing with Scotty and ended up having a couple of double bogeys and a triple bogey and ended up losing that spot because he lost his composure. And I think sometimes we focus on the negative of what he lost versus his steady play that he did to get into that position that he was in as well. And I think that's a true metaphor for each of us in our lives, in our businesses, is what happens with the circumstances presented to us. How do we show up? And sometimes we fail and sometimes we fall. And obviously Rory stepped into his power. He just stepped into it. And I think that he envisioned that for himself.
100%. So now I want to turn it over to takeaways, agreements, rebuttals. This is a little bit more open faced at this point. So Bill, I want to open it up to you first. Is there any major points that you agree with or any main points that you want to rebuttal or challenge or anything like that?
No rebuttals, like you said earlier, very hospitable group tonight so far. But
maybe we should tell Morgan, hey, we realize we're a lot more copacetic as when you're not here.
We eliminated that East
He's
Coast
not even here to defend himself, poor guy.
No, I definitely reinforce and support the importance of that composure, self-talk, right? And I think Kim just brought it up. No matter what the situation is that presents itself, how you respond will impact you. But then if it doesn't go the way you want it, like with Cam Smith, you were talking about, Kim, he did, have his moments, but he finished very strong. And if you watched his body language, nonverbals, unspoken communication as he was wrapping up his round, he knew it was over and he was a great competitor, right? Very, very, you know, I don't want to say happy, because inside I'm sure he's very frustrated, but he embraced the moment as a professional. So I think those are all the amazing takeaways. And then what I said before, the game's better when Rory is at the top competing. So I hope he continues to build on last weekend.
Yeah. Kim, any big takeaways, any rebuttals, any comments?
I think the biggest thing is find joy again. I think that's one of the pieces that we struggle with as athletes after we leave our sport, is finding a joy in our purpose again. And I think that is something to tap into, to really, really go back into what drives us. And, you know, what got us to go outside and play every day when we were kids, what got us to go to work. You know, it's not chasing the dollar bill, and people think it is, but it isn't. It's what is the freedom that dollar is going to give you? What joy is that lifestyle going to provide you? You know, people want to chase millions of dollars and they haven't even made six figures. They don't know how to do that yet. And to celebrate those small wins, celebrate those wins every single opportunity you have, whether you come in first, second, or last. I mean, look where Tiger ended up and the joy he had, right? Because he could compete, right? And I think that's the biggest takeaway, is find joy. Yeah.
100%. And I'm in total agreement with that. And I think one of the other big takeaways that I had, which Bill, you had mentioned, you'd be curious to see if, you know, he was in that final pairing, would he keep that same mindset, right? And sometimes the situation itself, you know, he's playing with house money, he's out there, he's kind of like, hey, I've got nothing to lose. Like, we can throw it all out there. Right. So I think that's a big thing to recognize, especially as an athlete, when you understand that every moment can be like that. You can play with a sense of freedom, and you don't have to be given a situation where you're not in the final pairing. But a lot of people feel that way, right? Like, you get into you're in a tournament, you're in this other stuff, and you wonder why there's all these crazy upsets, because they're like, what do we have to lose? Right? Like, if we lose to like the number 1 or number 2 team in the nation. But if we win, we go absolutely berserk. And this is like, we're on borrowed time.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be really interesting for athletes to start taking that concept and creating that environment for themselves where they can say, hey, we're like, in the grand scheme of things, all these athletes are super young. And when it comes to competing and finding that balance between being assertive and aggressive versus being composed and strategic, sometimes it just calls for pick one or the other. Because if you can go all in on one side or another, then you don't have to worry about, oh, am I choosing the right mixture of things? Keep it simple for yourself, right? So I think that stood out to me a ton, especially as you were mentioning it. Okay, let's change topics. Let's think of something a little bit more disappointing, some people would say, especially if you are on, you know, in the LA area. I'm looking right now at the current lineup for the 2022 NBA playoffs. And you have the Suns, you have the Pelicans, you have the Spurs, the Mavericks, the Jazz, Golden State Warriors. You've got the Nuggets. Let's go, Nuggets. Colorado represent. You've got the Timberwolves, LA Clippers, the Grizzlies, the Bulls, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Nets, the Cavs. You have Toronto, the 76ers, for goodness sakes, the Hornets, for goodness sakes, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Miami Heat. There's a couple names missing from there, and there's a big one that seems to be missing from there. Specifically, a team that has had someone who has been in, I think, every NBA finals for like the past 10 or 12 years. I don't remember. I mean, I can't personally remember the last time that LeBron James wasn't in a finals. I mean, probably
last year.
Yeah, I was going to say it was last year. And then before then, it was just this massive string of LeBron James being either in the conference championships or in the finals. He's always been a part of the playoffs. I mean, ever since he was in the NBA, I don't know how many seasons he's missed the playoffs, but I would guarantee you could count it on less than like a couple of fingers.
4 times, as I'm looking it up, it says 4 times that he's missed playoffs in his entire career.
And he's
That's
had a long
crazy.
one. He's had a long career, and it shows and I'm not picking on LeBron, even though Michael Jordan's the best player to ever live.
Facts.
Amen.
Beautiful. See, we're all in agreement on all this stuff. And I love it. So
That might just mean we're all older, Keegan. I'm not sure.
There is that. There is that, Bill.
And I was born in 92, which is when Space Jam came out. So obviously, hey,
right.
you know, I've got ties. But I'm not picking on LeBron James. Obviously, they had an incredibly stacked team. Like they just had they had Russell Westbrook, they had Rajon Rondo, they had Dwight Howard, they had LeBron, they had, you know, all these amazing athletes on their team. And they just couldn't find the rhythm enough to make it to the playoffs. So they were considered a super team. We can call it what it is. You know, they brought in some amazing talent, all-stars, and they didn't make the playoffs. So what I want to ask, first and foremost, first question, and Kim, you are going to be on the clock here. What do you think are the pros of super teams in sports?
Obviously, if you have big names, there's an expectation, right? And typically with big names, if you look at the history, I mean, LeBron came he was 19, right? When his rookie year in like 2003 or something like that, if I remember correctly. And you just think of the impact that man has had on the game itself. And he's following in the footsteps of some pretty amazing people, specifically at the Lakers, right? I mean, from Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Byron Scott, Michael Cooper, James Worthy. That's what I grew up watching when I was a kid, being in Orange County and following the Lakers. And when you stack a team, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're guaranteed to win. You're still dealing with personalities. You're still dealing with big egos. I mean, there's pros and cons. You have high caliber players, but then depending on the chemistry, depending on the execution, again, it's always about execution on game day. Yep. And if you're not making the playoffs, it's because you haven't executed enough, consistently enough over the course of your season together collectively, especially in a team sport, to be consistent, to be able to make it. So sure, you can stack a team, but there's never a guarantee. It's sports. There's never a guarantee.
Yep. And Bill, coming over to you, pros and cons. Kim took the honors of going pros and cons. Pros and cons of super teams in sports.
Pros. I mean, if you live in one of those markets, right, it gives you hope. It takes you from being a potential Cubs fan to a Yankees fan just overnight, because you can bring in the right people, or you go from being the Lakers to the Miami Heat when they brought in kind of the first big group, right, the big three. So I think that's cool about it. I think it's the con of it, or the downside. I think people just accept, like, if you put big names together, like Kim said, things are going to happen. I would look at the Lakers situation and go, and take AD out of it. I think he's phenomenal. But look who went to LA. I wouldn't say any high-end leaders, right? People with proven track records. If anything, they were the guys that, yeah, they're good, but go ahead, have them. like we got our nucleus, we got our high-end winners, but you can go ahead and have those guys, because that can make your super team. So I think the con is you get caught up in wanting to make your own super team, and maybe you overlook the aspect that at this age, LeBron needed a really high-end leader and another superpower, and he didn't get it. He got, he got Ant-Man, and he needed Superman. So
totally different comics. I hear you.
Yeah.
Just not even in the same universe. Let's see. Super teams, pros. I'm going to go the Morgan Koth signature route. Money, right? You bring in all these amazing talents. And what does it do? It brings money into the program. You get amazing jersey sales, you get amazing attendance. In every single state, every single game that you play, people want to go to just get a glimpse of your team at work. And you just have these amazing individuals that people look up to, and suddenly you build this, you have a marketing machine on your hands. That is one of the biggest pros that you can have in sports by having a super team. That's why big trades are made. And it's why immediately when people like Russell Wilson are traded to the Broncos, everybody's immediately looking for a jersey, right? Because they want to support a big name. Cons are you saturate leading roles. LeBron James is in a position where he has to try and balance, being a clutch performer. Give me the ball when the game clock is running down, where he knows his role, and you're taking that and you're saturating it with other people who feel the same way, who are in the exact same role, and it confuses players. You should have one Damian Lillard type person and everybody else be a position role player so that you can fill those roles accurately. Okay. We talked about pros and cons. Now, the next question that I want to ask. Kim, if you were working with the Lakers this year, where we've transported into a world where you are now at the helm of some of the performance from a mental perspective with the Lakers, what are some things you would have done in order to help them potentially get better results as the season went on?
Great question. The whole matter to me is about self-efficacy. The ability to believe in yourself to achieve the role and the job that you have. And I think you touched on it just now, where it becomes a diluted player pool of who has the specific role, right? And you're dealing with both individual efficacy, but then collective and team efficacy of being able to, what are our roles? Are we willing to share the spotlight differently? And if so, how do I step back and institute that, right? If LeBron is no longer the whole end all be all of the Lakers and you have everybody else that's coming with you, you have to shift the ability for them to see themselves as a team player instead of always being the one in charge, being able to step back and co-captain versus always being the one, that go-to player. I think, Steph Curry on the Warriors, he still is the best shooter in the game. And everyone knows if you are going to get the ball to Steph Curry, you have a 90% chance that he's going to hit it, because that's still his role, right? If you had everybody doing that, if you put LeBron and him and everybody on the same team, I think that takes away the efficacy of that. That's what I would focus on, is how do we shift that to be more executed, to execute that in gameplay.
Beautiful. Bill, if you were at the helm of some of the player dynamics and performance, what would you have done throughout the season or to potentially get a better result?
Well, let's see. I'll put on a real. I would have probably, I recognize who leads the team, right? That's LeBron. It's his team. As a general manager, I'm probably going to be done after this year too, along with the coach, because we're not getting rid of LeBron. He fills the seat. So I would have brought him in and said, "Hey, you're the leader. 2 or 3 guys are going to go. Who's it going to be? Because we're going to slim down our salary here a little bit, bring in some people, but clearly the ones that you wanted to bring that really aren't helping the dynamics for our young guys, we're going to move them on. And so you can be a part of that. I'll give you some input. I probably would bring in AD too, just for the nonverbal or the unspoken communication of the team, is that as a general manager, let's be honest, AD, every bit as important as LeBron right now. Not 20 years ago, but right now, today. So I would want the team to see that those two are on the level playing field. So, let's free up some space. You two now work with the guys that we have, bring some guys up from the G League, and let's see if we can turn it around. Because either way, unless we make a miracle run, you guys are running me out the building anyway at the end of the year because we lost with LeBron James. So I would have looked at those dynamics.
So just to reiterate here before I go, Kim, your take on this is to make sure that people understand their roles a little bit better so that everybody can play their positions more effectively and you're not oversaturating a singular mindset of a person in a specific role. Bill, yours is, hey, let's fix the problem here. Let's fill up some cap space. Let's bring some people in. Let's make sure that we can actually have some position players and we don't have to over ego anybody who's on the floor and put too much pressure on, or oversaturate it that way. I am going to take a kind of a strange route. What I would say is, let's say I can't remove anybody. I would sit there and I would say, okay, you all get to decide what games, who stands out, right? And if that game is won or lost, it runs through whatever superstar. You pick AD, Russell Westbrook, you pick, Rondo, you pick LeBron. Pick a game. Have all of them duke it out, pick out whatever games that they want and say, this is the game where you shine, you run it, you be a superstar, and everybody else supports that, because we all know they're all capable of taking over a game. They're all capable of scoring 50 points, right? So make it intentional rather than say who's gonna score the 40 points, who's gonna, you don't have 2-3 players fighting over buckets or anything like that, but instead put yourself in a position where you have an agreement on the team, where everybody comes to a common agreement where they say, tonight we're running the offense through this person, or from, if so-and-so wants to stand out on defense, you pick an offensive and a defensive player so people can then sit into those roles a little bit better and potentially get yourself a better result and remove that distraction of who is going to shine tonight. You live or die off of one person.
Keegan, I'm going to ask you one more question.
Yes.
In that situation, what would Jackie Moon have done?
He would have run the offense through the alley-oop as always and gone straight to coffee black.
Yeah.
Just let him go nuts. And he would have said, we're going to score 140 points for free corn dogs for everybody, not 120. Obviously.
I did think on my answer just said I'd wrestle a big bear at halftime and make everybody happy and forget about how bad we were. But
gotta be a showman. Gotta be a showman. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'd like to essentially close this out with understanding either major takeaways from what we just talked about, or additional comments that you would have for basically the topic of super teams and working with big personalities on teams as a whole. Kim, I'm going to roll it over to you first.
I think it's an interesting one to delve into further. I was just looking up, Paris Saint-Germain has the same situation. They brought Neymar, Mbappe, and Messi onto a team, right? And they have to be dealing. I mean, these are 3 players who are all distinctly different, but have arguably some of the best players to touch the ball in the modern era. And it's one of those things where I look at these powerhouses, right? And all the money that goes into building these teams. And I still go back to the most fundamental thing in the world is playing a sport is like the best thing ever, right? It's how do you still tap into, to bring it all the way back to Rory's joy, truly. And if we're not bringing each of these pieces of the puzzle back into the gameplay of joy, whether it's you use your effort, Keegan, of saying, hey, one player each game is going to be that person, right? Or whether, Bill, you're talking about, oh, we're going to remove the coach who didn't execute doing what they needed to do, open up some cap money for some of these players, pick 1 or 2 and build it around them. we still have to come back to that most fundamental thing. You play a game for fun for a hell of a lot of money, and execution and having that joy. I think of someone like Andre Agassi, who hated the sport for a period of time of tennis, and how sad that was for me to know how sad he was competing at that level. And I just want to always bring it back to, it's a game. It's a game, and play it and have fun.
Yep. Bill, final comments.
Yeah, I think we touched on the super team part. Here's my hot take, okay? Let's see, or let's count the number of years or seasons before we see super teams through the portal being developed at the college level.
Oh, good one. Yep.
And then let's see how everybody loves it, right? And the back and forth, because at some point, like at my age, I remember like when the Fab Five, all got together, right, at Michigan, and like that, I thought that was awesome. Let alone black socks, black Nikes, baggy shorts, that stuff was all cool. But that was really the super team then. Those guys connected appropriately and all that stuff. So I think that'll be interesting, because let's just face it, it's going to happen. Now, if it happens with an Alabama or somebody, no big deal, right? Just the rich getting richer. If Deion Sanders pulls it off, look out. If a non-blue blood, as we talked last week, pulls it off in basketball, look out, because then people have more to say on it, I would assume.
Yeah, and it'll be curious how, when it comes to NIL and as all these things start to figure themselves out, and as a whole, as money starts to shift around with college players, they start to figure out where they sit and all this stuff, how they can monetize the game a little bit more for college athletes. And then college athletes have this portal to be able to figure out, okay, I really want to go here, I want to go there, whatever that may look like, to figure out how some Moneyball plays into it, how coaches start to say, hey, how can we get people here with good branding deals and other stuff like that from a college perspective on the cheapest that we can, with the stats that we want to be able to play certain position roles in order to be able to get the best results possible. Because, I mean, let's be realistic, like in the next few years, it's still going to be a bit of a shit show when it comes to college sports and NIL and all this sort of stuff. It's going to be quite a few years before it really starts to formalize itself and people figure things out, because it's absolutely the Wild West right now. I mean, on day one, you had multi-million-dollar contracts being made with, individuals who are already kind of pseudo celebrities and all this other stuff. And they wind up not doing anything or whatever. Right. So it's a total crapshoot on how it's all going to play out. But I completely agree with you that at some point there will become super teams when it comes to college. There will be kids who decide, I want to play all 4 years and I want to win as many championships as possible. And I want to try and go to the school that is going to give me the best chance at doing that. And the coaches are going to be in the same vein. They're going to say, let me try and stack my team as much as possible. And it'll be interesting to see, like you said, if it's Alabama, cool, they've been doing it for a while. It's because they've cared about doing things the right way and implementing disciplines and implementing all these amazing things like mental health and performance and all this other stuff. And same thing with Georgia, which, go figure, they were both in the national championship game. But as it permeates to other teams, it'll be interesting to see how the talent level rises for some of these teams, right? They try and recruit people in, but also as the tactics rise, people start taking, more notice of, hey, we need mental performance coaches. We need to care about this and this and this. And obviously then you're going to start to see shifts happen again, where more teams are going to introduce themselves to the college playoff series with football or the NCAA tournament and all this other stuff. But then it'll level out again. And I'm guessing the blue bloods will make a comeback, right? There'll be a little bit of a shift. But when it comes to, final thoughts specifically on the stuff that we talked about tonight, I think Rory set an amazing precedent when it comes to a highly mental game. You can go out there and play completely free and honestly kind of, I mean, it's not that he doesn't care. He obviously cares a ton. This is his livelihood. But he went out and he played with a real sense of joy. I think he set a precedent being older in his career to show that this is something that people can go out and they can get results from, playing with a real sense of joy. Now, optimism and positivity, much like anything else, is a muscle. You have to train it. I guarantee the balance that Rory has had with his life outside of the game and inside of the game has helped him train to actually probably perform better than the people who obsess. Now, he's not going to become a legend of the game, but he will have a lot of success, I think, because he has taken time to really train the optimism and happiness muscle that a lot of people don't really take the time to care about. I mean, I'm curious, what are your all's thoughts on that?
Go ahead, Kim.
100%. What goes on between the 5 inches between our ears is more important than anything else. And when you go through difficulty and go through tough times, how have you practiced that? And who do you surround yourself with? It's not just what goes on in your head. It's what are you consuming and who are you consuming with, right? For some people, balance is not always available to them for other reasons, et cetera. They may not be in a relationship, or they don't have kids, or they don't have these pressing things that are different, right? Social barriers, et cetera, that are different for people. I think that everyone needs to practice that muscle of positivity, and, you know, surrounding yourself with people who make you ask questions of yourself and ask you to get better at being you. I think that's part of coaching. And I think that's part of sport. And I think that's part of business. I think I was with a client today and we talked about how do you continue being an active learner no matter where you are in your level, right? Like always seeking and pursuing that next level of joy, of happiness, of love, of all these things. Life is not just your sport or your career or your path. It's all of you. It's all encompassing. And so how do you live your best life? You have to focus on being optimistic, even when the ish hits the fan. And even when things are difficult, what are we practicing to get that resilience muscle working? And so you can still get that positivity coming. I think there is, you know, in some ways, toxic positivity. There's that conversation about glossing over things and saying everything's perfect. No, it's acknowledging that things are difficult and that you have the ability to overcome it. That's being positive. That's optimism versus glossing over it. And I think we need to make sure we focus on that too, because like you mentioned, Rory's situation, he's probably frustrated that he was that close to being, to winning, but it was like, he's still happy. I think that's the power of positivity and the power of optimism for sure.
100%. Bill.
No, I agree. And I think it's, joy, we keep coming back to it, right? We touched on it a little bit last week, and it's just a weird word in sports, right? It's not a normal word to be joyous, to experience joy, to accept joy. And I think just working with our young student athletes, I know, on our football team last year, once we really started in high school, once we started taking a mindset on the defensive side of the ball, like, hey guys, what happens if they get 10 yards? Oh, we gave up a first down. No, it just means it's 1st and 10 again. What happens if they get 2 yards? It's 2nd and 8. Like being able to, with student athletes at a young age, and then of course you hope it grows as they get older, just accept what's in front of you as just that, what's in front of you, and embrace it, right? You give up a big play, great. You turn around, you make a big play, great. So it's 1-1. Still 3rd down, right? Like, if you go 1st, 2nd, it's still 3rd down. Like nobody cares what happened the last time or 2 plays ago in that play. So, and I think that can help as you move individuals you work with, and I think that can help just stay in the moment and really embrace that joy, because I think that's the coolest part of what we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah, 100%. I want to end this out because we haven't done this yet. I would like to have a moment. I know I've done some brief introductions of everybody throughout the episodes and stuff like that, but if and I wanted, and obviously next week, I'm sure Morgan will probably be around, so I'll do this with him then, but I'm curious. When it comes to what we all do, how people can, obviously connect with us a little bit more. I think it's, where they can go to continue the conversation if there's something that stood out to them. I kind of want to ask, and Kim, I'll start with you. If people find parts of your conversation or the positions that you take on any of these topics, or anything like that, or just want to learn more about you, where can they go?
Great question. Thank you. You can find me on LinkedIn, Kim Brady, and on my website, kimbradybusinesscoaching.com. And you can also find me on Instagram as well. And that's at Coach KB15. More than happy to talk with folks, and definitely looking for clients because I want to help you find your next journey and be your coach. I love what I do. It's fun.
Beautiful. I love it. Bill, where can people go to learn more about you and get engaged with you?
Yeah, I mean, best place where I'm most active, look me up on LinkedIn. Just type in Bill Dean and you'll get to my page. You can also visit our website at www.cosmh.fit. And from there, you can surf around. Sorry, I got something stuck in my my throat, apparently. You can surf around, learn a little bit more about what we do, the clients that we work with. But also right now, our biggest initiative is, and I'll kind of speak a little bit for Morgan, and he can be much more eloquent than me right now next week. But, our Wellness U platform, where we are rolling it out at the university and high school levels and truly giving organizations and their athletic departments an in-hand tool to support the individual performance, as well as then give amazing data to the leaders to build that infinite plan on how to develop a stronger, higher performing culture. So we're excited about where we're at. Find Wellness U, or visit us at the website, and we'd love to hear from you.
Beautiful. And everybody knows where they can find me, over at lamarcoaching.com, or shoot me an email at Keegan, Keegan at lamarcoaching.com. Let me know how you like the series. Let me know how you like any of the speakers that are on here. If you have suggestions, comments, questions, concerns. Morgan's not here, so hopefully there won't be too many concerns. And Morgan, if you're watching this, we all love it. But
we definitely upgraded this week, Keegan. We upgraded.
We're all in agreement on things. We're all a little bit happier. The mood's a little bit raised. Although I did have to drop the money quote. But seriously, if anybody wants to continue this conversation, you know where to find everybody, and obviously feel free to comment or anything like that. And if you enjoy this, consider subscribing, sharing it with other people who are out there who may want to be listeners, or if you have people in mind who may want to be strong contributors of this, we love to have them considered as being a guest on here to give their thoughts and expertise on any of the topics that we are talking about here. So as always, this is incredible. I love you guys to death. I absolutely have a blast with these things, and we'll be back next week. But until then, hey, we had a fun time. Appreciate everybody.
Nice to see you guys. I'm so happy I'm back.
You too.